The Wars of the Roses, a struggle for the English throne. The Wars of the Roses, 1455 to 1487, was a series of bloody conflicts fought between the House of Lancaster and the House of York, two rival branches of the royal Plantagenet family, over control of the English throne. The war was marked by political intrigue, shifting allegiances, and some of the most famous battles in English history. It ultimately led to the rise of the Tudor Dynasty, bringing a new era of stability to England. Background and causes. The origins of the Wars of the Roses can be traced to the late 14th and early 15th centuries. The ruling House of Lancaster, represented by King Henry VI, struggled to maintain control over England due to internal divisions and military failures. Henry VI, a weak and mentally unstable ruler, was heavily influenced by his ambitious wife, Margaret of Anjou. This instability opened the door for the House of York, led by Richard, Duke of York, to challenge Lancaster's legitimacy. England had also been weakened by the long and costly Hundred Years' War against France, which ended in 1453 with England losing nearly all its territories in France except for Calais. Economic hardship and discontent among the nobility further fueled the conflict. The opposing factions adopted their respective symbols, the red rose for Lancaster and the white rose for York, thus giving the war its name. First phase of the conflict, 1455 to 1461. The war officially began in 1455 at the First Battle of St. Albans, where Richard, Duke of York, and his allies defeated the Lancastrians and briefly took control of the king. However, the conflict was far from over. Over the next few years, both sides gathered support, leading to the devastating Battle of Wakefield, 1460, where Richard, Duke of York, was killed. His son, Edward, took up the Yorkist cause and quickly proved himself a capable leader. In 1461, Edward led the Yorkists to a decisive victory at the Battle of Towton, one of the bloodiest battles in English history, with an estimated 28,000 casualties. This triumph allowed Edward to claim the throne as King Edward IV, forcing Henry VI and Margaret of Anjou to flee to Scotland. The reign of Edward IV and Lancastrian resistance, 1461 to 1471. With Edward IV on the throne, England experienced a brief period of stability. However, Henry VI's supporters, including powerful nobles like the Earl of Warwick, known as the Kingmaker, continued to resist. Warwick, originally a supporter of Edward IV, eventually turned against him due to political disagreements and helped restore Henry VI to the throne in 1470. Edward IV was forced into exile but returned in 1471, reclaiming his throne after decisive victories at the Battle of Barnet and the Battle of Tewkesbury. The latter saw the death of Henry VI's son, Edward of Westminster, and shortly after, Henry VI himself was murdered in the Tower of London. With the Lancastrian line effectively extinguished, Edward IV reigned unchallenged until his death in 1483. The rise of Richard III, 1483 to 1485. Following Edward IV's death, his young son, Edward V, was supposed to take the throne. However, Edward IV's brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, seized power, claiming that Edward IV's children were illegitimate. He had Edward V and his younger brother, known as the Princes in the Tower, imprisoned, where they mysteriously disappeared, likely murdered. Richard III was crowned king, but his rule was deeply unpopular due to the suspicious circumstances surrounding his rise to power. The fall of Richard III and the rise of the Tudors. Richard III's reign was short-lived. A new challenger emerged in Henry Tudor, a Lancastrian claimant with a weak but legitimate claim to the throne through his mother, Margaret Beaufort. Henry, with support from France and discontented English nobles, invaded England in 1485. The decisive Battle of Bosworth Field saw Henry's forces defeat Richard III's army. Richard himself was killed in battle, making him the last English king to die in combat. Henry Tudor was crowned King Henry VII, marking the end of the Wars of the Roses. To solidify his rule, Henry VII married Elizabeth of York, daughter of Edward IV, uniting the rival houses and establishing the Tudor Dynasty. This marriage symbolically ended the conflict and ushered in a new era of peace and stability in England. Legacy of the Wars of the Roses. The Wars of the Roses had a profound impact on England's political and social structure. It marked the decline of medieval feudalism, as many noble families were decimated in the fighting. Henry VII's reign established the powerful Tudor monarchy, leading to centralized royal authority and the eventual English Renaissance. The conflict also inspired countless works of literature, including William Shakespeare's historical plays, such as Henry VI and Richard III, which dramatized the events of the war. Today, the Wars of the Roses remain one of the most fascinating and influential periods in English history. Conclusion. The Wars of the Roses was a brutal and complex struggle that shaped the future of England. It saw the rise and fall of kings, legendary battles, and shifting allegiances, ultimately leading to the birth of the Tudor Dynasty. From the chaos of civil war emerged a more stable and centralized England, setting the stage for the nation's rise as a major European power in the centuries to come.